Started? Let's get started. I'm looking at the corner where the production team is for some sort of signal that we're live. We're here? Okay, well, wonderful. Welcome back, everybody, to the afternoon sessions of GEO Forum 2025. We are in our secondary room with a nice group of people here. We've got some guests online, and we've got a lot of viewers online as well. And let's see who we've got coming in. Oh, well, luckily Zoom has called you both panelists, so I'm going to guess. No, I shouldn't guess. We're going to introduce our panelists in just a moment. And is there anybody else joining you? I feel like we've lost a couple of people.
Yeah, I believe, so Meredith Cowan, Executive Director with Department of Emergency Management. Andrew Mitten, who's our Director of Regional Operations, was pulled away at the Lake George fire, so he won't be joining us today. And I believe, though, one of the other panelists that you see there with the camera off is most likely our colleagues from the municipality of Annapolis County, who were going to join us today to chat about our situation and how we worked through some of our technology and lack of in the Lake George Long Lake fire, sorry.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. And who else do we have on the screen?
Hi there, Neal Alderson.
Neal, I was looking for you here, so I couldn't convince anyone to pretend that they were you, so that's probably worked out well. Here you are.
So here I am, Director of Nova Scotia Guard with Nova Scotia's Department of Emergency Management.
Excellent. We were talking about Nova Scotia Guard in the plenary session this morning. Really keen to learn more about it. Awesome. And is there anybody who can unmute a camera or microphone from the municipality?
Can you hear me? It's Don Campbell. Sorry, I'm having some bandwidth problems.
That's okay, Don. We can definitely hear you, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, not at all, not at all. When we pull together a panel about emergency management, we're taking quite a risk, right? Especially these days, because unfortunately, we're not the emergency. So when things happen and folks aren't here, that's actually a good sign because it means that we have good people who can respond to emergencies. So let's get started. Welcome, everyone. The last few years have seen far too many emergencies and crises hit our communities across Nova Scotia. Mass shooting, deadly floods, forest fires, hurricanes, and more. Thankfully, the government is responding by building our collective capacity to respond to those crises even more effectively. We now have a Department of Emergency Management and the Nova Scotia Guard. And today we're going to meet some of the people involved and discuss how digital inclusion or exclusion impacts their work and emergency management in Nova Scotia. In particular, we've got a panel of folks who have been working on the Long Lake fire for the last couple of months. We'll hear some stories and real-world impact, and if there's time at the end, we'll take some questions from the audience. Before we dive in, a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you in person and many joining online, thank you very much for attending. We want to reward you for you being here. We've got door prizes, and one of you who's watching us right now will be the winner of a $250 gift card from Orchard, Canada's largest refurbisher of mobile devices. So if you're in person, you're going to need to scan the QR code on the sheets on the table in order to qualify for the door prize, and there's also a QR code for feedback. And those of you online, your simple presence will have your name thrown in the hat. I mentioned the feedback. We'd love to get your feedback, and now we kind of already started to meet our guests, but we're going to go around and hear from each one of them a little bit more about yourself, where you are, and specifically what your role is and how it relates to emergency management. And if we can start with you, Meredith, and then we'll go to Neal and then Dawn.
Sure. Executive Director of Planning and Preparedness with the Department of Emergency Management. As was mentioned, we're a new department, so just over a year old. And the purpose of the department was really in response to 2023, both the wildfires and the floods, and the recognition that there needed to be better collaboration, coordination, and communication around emergency management. And so what was Emergency Management Office was merged with regional operations. And then of course the corporate side, which my team sits at. And so as a new department, we are really working hard to identify gaps that exist in emergency management. We're going to talk about that obviously today. I'm going to send it over to my colleague Neal, who also works on this team with me.
Thanks, Meredith. Good afternoon, Neal Alderson, Director of Nova Scotia Guard. So as Director of the Nova Scotia Guard, our role is really to sort of proactively coordinate and manage the volunteer response during times of major emergencies. So one of the great things about Nova Scotia that happens, or I should say the positive side to times of tragedy is Nova Scotians show up, they want to help, they want to support their neighbor, they want to help their community. The bad side to that is they show up, they want to support their neighbor, their community, and often it's in large groups and often frequently by a number of community people. So the Guard really is looking at how do we take that energy, enthusiasm, and spirit of help that many Nova Scotians want to provide when their community needs it the most, but to kind of proactively manage it so that it's not impacting the operations or the response to a major emergency, but it's actually helping to bring in volunteers and community members at the right time, at the right place, and with the right skill sets to ensure that it's helping and not taking away from kind of the response. So that's a little bit about what my role is with the Nova Scotia Guard at the department.
Thanks, Neal. And over to you, Dawn.
Hi, I'm Dawn Campbell. I'm currently Deputy CAO at the County of Annapolis. However, at the time of the wildfire, I had a temporary assignment as interim CAO and served as incident commander when the Regional Emergency Management Organization activated in response to the wildfire. I guess our job is pretty straightforward. We're basically the people embedded in the community and the government closest to the people that tries to respond on the ground to the needs of the persons who, in this case, were evacuated, and also to assist in supporting emergency response for anything that might exceed their current ability to respond. So similar in many ways, and certainly a partnership with the two previous panelists who've introduced themselves. It's very much a collaborative process. In the circumstance of our wildfire, it certainly continues to be an ongoing and recovery process. And certainly the fact that it was a very remote community that this wildfire occurred in, which had very little, for example, self-service available, was and continues to be a challenge in meeting the needs to communicate with people on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Dawn. We look forward to hearing more about that. And so thank you all for being here today. And more than just thank you for being here, on behalf of everyone here and everyone in the province, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to all of you and the people you work with and first responders who have just, seems like, spent months and months and months battling fires and trying to keep us safe while we go through this incredible drought. So thank you. Thank you all. In honor, actually, of your appearance today, I've requested extreme cold weather and heavy rain tonight, and I hope that helps. All right,
Okay.
so the first question I have to ask each of you, and we'll just go around maybe in the same order to start, is, in your most recent experience, and maybe there's others, how important do you see digital inclusion is when it comes to emergency management, and why is that?
So I guess I would start with just an overriding statement to say that in an emergency, those that are impacted are vulnerable. And that's vulnerable in a moment. Those that don't have access to technology and digital access to information are vulnerable all the time. And these emergencies really shine a light on that. And it's been very surprising. I know Dawn will also chat about this because it's the residents in her community, and she did mention this is a rural part of the province. It's everything from the ability to receive alerts, so emergency alerts, to understanding where and when to go during an evacuation, what to pack, what you need to have, ongoing conversations, so that the department itself tries to engage and educate Nova Scotians on what to have access to when you leave your home. But in the moment of an emergency, we see things like registering at the Red Cross. It's with a QR code. We see the province offering financial assistance through an online portal. It requires, even as recently as yesterday, we were chatting with the Annapolis County around water testing. And during that conversation, it came about that once those water tests are back, you take the numbers and you feed them into an online portal, and it'll tell you if your water is safe or not. So we collectively as a society have moved forward very aggressively on access to information and making it what we deem to be easy for folks. And it is easy, but it's also a privilege. And it is not something that everybody has access to. And those people are generally left out of most sort of supports. We make things hard for people who are struggling with many things. To expect them to find their support or caring in a digital format is really making them incredibly vulnerable at a time where they don't need to be. I know from a Department of Emergency Management perspective, we have a whole team called the Public Safety Field Communications. That team rolls out into these areas where there's an emergency to increase communication capacity. So if there is no internet access, if they need radios, as wildfire fighters would need, in the case of whether it's the Lansdowne search, things like that, satellite hookups are created so that the first responders have access to each other. So we absolutely understand the importance of making sure that people are able to reach out and get the information and have all those communications. But we sort of have forgotten that there's a whole group of people in society and in our communities that don't have access to that. And so in the most important time of an emergency, they're left behind with some very important information. So what I would say is, we feel, having worked really closely with the municipality, to frankly talk about how do we reach people. And I think Dawn and I would say to you, it's so interesting that you go from public alerting, so everybody got an alert on their phones, and that was great, and it's a wonderful tool to have. But then a couple weeks into the process, recognizing that we had to go back to sort of 1985 and do a newsletter, because people didn't have access and they needed to understand. So when we think about communicating with people, we have to make a choice. Are we going to make technology universal, and therefore those types of communications can be what we need to do? Or are we going to continue to have a mix of both and recognize? I think that for us as a department and a province, these moments give us a chance to go back to our colleagues in government from a whole government approach to say, we know that those folks that are without digital access need it, and it needs to be a priority. And I think about a wildfire. We were very lucky in this case, but if we had had an encampment, if we had had people that were experiencing homelessness anywhere nearby, I'm not sure how we would have communicated with those folks. And they deserve safety and care and support as much as anybody else. And so we really, as we look at these more and more of these emergency situations, we need to really spend some time making sure that we are ensuring everybody has access to information, care, and support. And if that is through digital inclusion, then that needs to be a priority.
Well, thank you so much, Meredith. GEO Nova Scotia, we define digital inclusion as having the devices that you need, the connectivity that you need, and the basic skills to use them confidently and safely. And if you don't have all three, you're really kind of left out from a whole lot. Let's hear from Neal. Same question. How do you see digital inclusion showing up in your work, and why might it be an important topic for you?
I have to follow Meredith on that. Everything Meredith said. I think it is important, obviously, and in the work that we do, a lot of our communication is digital. But I always, myself and staff, like we work with volunteers. And I say this a lot to my staff is like, we have to be flexible, right? And for example, you know, we may have volunteers who are retired and may not be up to speed with all the latest apps and iPhones and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes we have to meet them where they are. Because for them, it might be like they just want a phone call to say, yeah, show up tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So, you know, I think for us, we want the flexibility or the convenience of the digital side, but we also have to recognize who we're working with. And Meredith made a good point. Like, so our deployment, we supported ground search and rescue crews in Pictou County for the search for Jack and Lily Sullivan. And for me, that was kind of one of our first, it was our first big deployment where guard members were activated. So of course you're all gung-ho and excited to go down, and then you realize there's no cell coverage, which means you can't send an email, which means you can't call somebody. And I quickly learned the importance of kind of that flexibility or communication, like literally, as Meredith said, going back to 1985. I literally had to pivot and go, okay, my check-in with my volunteers is I'm going to have to go to them every hour to make sure they're okay, because they were like 3 kilometers away from where I was. Now, we were, as Meredith pointed out, we're lucky that we have a part of our department, the Public Safety Field Communications Group, that has TMR or two-way radios that we can use in those types of situations and things. But I think, you know, it's important that digital inclusion is thought about, but I think in my work anyway, it's also recognizing we have to meet people where they are.
100%. Thank you very much, Neal. The Nova Scotia Guard is a really cool innovation here, and just the thought of having, you know, hundreds of Nova Scotians ready to respond in a volunteer way to their friends and neighbors who are in need. I think it really aligns with who we are as a province and as a people, but you've created a space for that to become real, instead of people sitting back saying, hey, I wish I could do something. I wish there was a way I could help. GEO acts in a similar way, right? The problems will continue, but if there's a place to go, if there's a system that's created that can draw in the resources that already exist and apply them when they're needed in an organized way, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
How about you, Dawn? How do you see digital inclusion showing up in this work?
And I would echo the 2 previous speakers for sure. All 3 elements that you mentioned that people need to have digital ability were lacking in one way or another in virtually all of the evacuees in this circumstance. They reside in a location where cell service, for example, or internet aren't readily available. So first of all, a lot of them did not possess the basic tools to be able to avail themselves of the technical means of communicating with each other or with us. For those people that, for example, did have computers, most of them did not take them with them. It was not something that was on their list of things to take in their emergency kit. For the few people that had cell phones and knew how to use them, they quickly ran out of minutes on their phone because they only had small plans for a limited number of minutes. So when they were away from home, and particularly if they were in a roaming circumstance, they ran out of minutes. So digital provides an excellent way to provide flexibility and layers of communicating with people such as evacuees, but you have to provide diversity. And I guess I would also add that people in these kinds of circumstances feel like they're in a situation where they're out of control, and they may be very digitally intelligent in a normal circumstance, but during times of high emotion, when their lives or livelihoods are at risk, they may not be quite as savvy about using those tools as they would in other circumstances.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really important point that you're bringing up, that, you know, closing the digital divide is not simply a matter of spending enough money, that there's polls everywhere and that and people have devices. Even if we handed out devices and the internet to everybody, it doesn't actually close the digital divide, because the skills and the confidence that need to go along with them are not automatic, and you can't just download them into yourself. And certainly what we've seen and experienced over the last 4 years with GEO Nova Scotia is that a lot of that last little bit is a person-to-person scenario. It is human to human. It's still such a relational experience, even though we've got all this technology. To have someone shoulder to shoulder with you, walking you through something or being there, it really changes the way people can engage with technology. When we're left alone with technology, when it's me versus the computer, and as you said, maybe I'm not in the best headspace, things can spiral out of control quickly. I don't know how many times I've almost launched my devices through a window because I'm not feeling it and it's not cooperating. So I think this is a really important point to make.
If I could just, if
yeah,
I could
please.
just jump in at that point, what I would say to you is, I couldn't agree with you more. When the province launched its application for financial funding for folks, the Nova Scotia Guard actually went to the community center and assisted people to fill out that form, and help them download. And really, to your point, I'm sure many of them could have done it on their phone. I'm sure many of them could have gone, and used anybody's computer. But they came there to talk about their situation. They came to get some additional information, and I think they went to a place where they felt they could be vulnerable. And to your point, there was a place for technology. It made it very easy for the province to collect that information and therefore get the money and supports to them very quickly. But the Nova Scotia Guard volunteers added the human touch to that. And I don't know if I'm going to articulate this the right way, and I've said this over and over again over the last number of weeks around emergency management, and this particular experience that we've learned is that there's the human experience in this. And I think what happens is when you concentrate too much on putting things on a website or on a platform, you forget that there's a human at the other side that needs their feelings and their experience taken into account. And so there's a place for it, but it's not a replacement. And so I think it's a great tool. And I think about being at that community center and people from the community that weren't directly impacted being able to help their neighbor feel better and know that they were going to be able to get their supports and be able to answer their questions, and then offer them more other supports that maybe they didn't know existed. And quite frankly, like a hug sometimes, or a shoulder to cry on. So technology is a great tool, but it's just that. It's not necessarily the answer, but everybody deserves to have that tool.
Yeah, so important. Thank you very much for bringing that up, Meredith. It's got its place, but it's not a replacement. It doesn't replace people. And when people are struggling, we know, I think from experience, that empathy, just a chance to be heard, a chance to be understood, is very, very powerful. And I think the other experience that we have when we're sitting across from a person is if we have any confusion, we're not quite sure, we just ask, right? There's this back and forth, and we immediately understand. But when it's, again, you versus the computer, there's no help, there's nothing else that what you see, and that can be paralyzing. You're like, I think I'm doing this right, but what if I hit the wrong button, or what if I miss something? And just that extra anxiety that comes with not really knowing if you've got it right can be very tough. So my next question is, how do the ways that we traditionally plan for emergencies overlook the fact that many Nova Scotians don't have access to the internet or devices or skills when they need it?
So I would say, I don't know about overlook. Overlook seems like the wrong word, but what I would say is, when you think of, I guess collectively, when we think of emergencies and ensuring as many people get the information as quickly as they can in order to save lives and move people, we automatically go to that tool that does that work the most. And so for us, it would be the alerting app and things of that nature. Now, what I will say is Nova Scotia has the Nova Scotia Alert. That alert is a much more robust and inclusive alert system. So you don't have to have 5G. It actually addresses a lot of our concerns about those that are using older phones or parts of the province that maybe don't have as much coverage. So we certainly looked at it from that perspective. What I would say though is having a department whose job it is to improve our capability, our capacity, and the continuity of emergencies, is that we're able to take a situation like Annapolis County and Long Lake Fire and say, in retrospect, here are some of the points that we need to better understand. The other thing I would say is that we do recognize and we are working on a vulnerable person strategy. And for us, vulnerable persons is not defined as those that could qualify for a vulnerable persons registry. Ours is more broad. So certainly those that would fit into very much GEO's demographic around what are those sectors in the province that require access to this kind of support and information availability. So for us, what I would say is we're doing two things. We're doing the very best we can with the best technology at hand, while also addressing those that don't have access to it. So we're working in both of those arenas in tandem. And I would say to you that I'm not sure we would have been there had we not created a department, because the way that it was divided previously, that really didn't sit with anybody. And so now as a department, we have to collect this information and come up with strategies that address those gaps.
This is so important, forming the department and creating the structure and the space, in our collective way of organizing ourselves, which is what government really is, to focus on these challenges and tie together these otherwise important but disconnected elements is critical. And it's in some ways, we don't see it in the public, right? Whether it's an office or a department or the merging of this, that doesn't show up, but the results of that work definitely show up in the innovations that are coming forward. And I've got the Nova Scotia Alert apps on my phone, and we're really excited to promote that as well. Neal, what do you think about this?
I think for me, that kind of, I know where you're coming from, Meredith, that traditional planning in the sense of, I think for us in the work that we do, and I can't speak for everybody in the department, but certainly from my own perspective, and certainly a number of people that I've worked with closely in the department, especially over the last couple of weeks, we always put people first, right? I mean, that's really what it's about. It's about keeping people safe and thinking about the impact. I think about it all the time. Like, what if that was me who was evacuated out of my home? Like, what do I need? How do I need support? What can I do with the Nova Scotia Guard that can help that individual or that family feel a little more comfortable? Like, I know whatever we're going to do is not going to be everything they need, but so again, when I kind of talked before, even with our members, of meeting them where they are, these situations are they're not textbook. There's no science to this. There's a lot of art. There is science to a bit of what we do, but it's a lot of art, and it's looking at constantly evaluating where you are, where you think you're going to be, what do we need, and you have to respond to that. And again, your answer can't always be, well, we'll just post everything on a website or we'll use the app. Like, often, a lot of times it's looking at, a multitude of ways to communicate to people. Sure, the digital side is important and people have access to that. But as we've all talked about here, like, it can be as simple as going back to a newsletter, holding a community meeting. That's something, again, I won't talk about that as much as Meredith or Don may with the community meeting part, but that idea of bringing people together to share information and kind of talk a little bit about what Meredith did of, we humanized that application for funding as kind of Meredith was alluding to. And, there was some information or support that came out of that just wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for the people kind of offering that support or listening. And so I think for us, it's you constantly have to evaluate what you're doing and how you're communicating to people, whether it's digitally, in person, et cetera, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Neal. Here we are, of course, GEO Nova Scotia has a vested interest perhaps in seeing technology roll out and be available for all kinds of things, but we should never lose sight of the fact that it can never be the only option we have, especially in an emergency situation where you always need a plan B and a plan C. If all our emergency management and preparedness was based on digital access, then what happens when the emergency is that we no longer have digital access? So it's really interesting, but go ahead.
I was just going to say to Matt too, like just on that point you've made of digital access and how important it is. I mean, I will say it greatly helps the work that we do, to be able to have that. And one small example of that for us is, so we have, over 1,300 Nova Scotians that are what we call deployable, meaning that could be out to support their community. And when you think about having tools like scheduling and some of these other things that from a technology side can really help the work that we do, it's a huge advantage. And I would hate for us to not have access to technology and support. I mean, just think of the logistics of trying to create schedules for 1,300 volunteers in multiple locations across the province to be able to deploy people effectively. It's vital to the work that we do, for sure.
100%. It likely wouldn't be a practical idea. It would be an idea, but it would be very hard to make real if we were all doing it the old-fashioned way. What do you think, Don?
It's funny because I had immediately the same reaction that Meredith expressed, which is I don't think it was overlooked. I think we always saw the digital world as a tool in our toolbox, but we never lost sight of the human experience in this. There are huge assets in being able to use something like a chat room or a listserv or a mail out. Those are powerful tools. They can move large segments of information very quickly to large groups of people, but it does not take the place of meeting people where they are. And I don't think we lost sight of that. And I thought the partnerships that we created and the way we pivoted for things old-fashioned, like a newsletter, worked very well. I think the Nova Scotia Alert has much more flexibility. It very much is similar to the alertable program that we already had in the county, and which was a powerful tool throughout this. But digitization and the digital world are powerful additional tools. They don't replace the person-to-person contact and the grassroots of meeting people where they are.
No, absolutely. As you said, it is a very powerful tool, and in a crisis, an emergency, speed and responsiveness can make all the difference in the world. I'll share with you, we did a survey of our GEO Nova Scotia program participants earlier this year. It went out to over 5,000 households who have received digital inclusion support from GEO. And one of the questions we asked was, how has this support impacted you? And 1 in 5, which was so over 1,000 of those households, specifically identified responding to a crisis as one of the things that changed, that they were able to do with the digital inclusion supports that they had. So we're talking about the crisis that we all see, the forest fire, the storm, the flood, but there's all kinds of individual crises that happen, aren't there, that happen to just us or just our household, and our world can change immediately. And being connected or getting information or getting support can make all the difference in the world. I just want to tell you one other quick story. Back in December, some folks may remember there was a search and rescue just around New Year's up in Cape Breton. A young man was lost in the woods at night in a marshy area through the thin ice. And the only way that he was found was the search and rescue with drones pinging the guy's cell phone. And it's the only way that they found him. And the reason why I know this is because that cell phone came from GEO Nova Scotia. And it was lost in the search, and they wrote us back to see if we could get another one, and here's how it was lost. And we all had goosebumps because he had just picked up that phone maybe 2 months before. And the thought of being out there in that situation without that, and teams risking themselves and being out there to try to find them and maybe not successful, it's scary to think. So we're really excited about trying to find ways to build on the human connection that's already there and make sure that we have as many tools as possible to help people in the moment. And I guess we should also give a shout out to the province for the investments that are coming down the pipe to try to close all those gaps in our rural and remote areas that don't have cell coverage, that don't have the signal that you need to reach. Because that could, I mean, that's a little bit of an emergency right there when you look at your phone and there's no signal. Like, you know? So this is really important, and it's going to set us up very well for the future should we have to deal with more challenges. I've got one more pre-written question. We'll see if this digs up anything new or interesting. The question is this: how could a focus on digital inclusion improve emergency response, especially for vulnerable communities? What might be, what could we do more, or what might be the benefit of leaning more into digital inclusion? Meredith?
What I would say is we see the opportunity from a vulnerable person's perspective, quite frankly, is to understand where people are. And I actually mean that physically. So when you think about things like an evacuation, and I think about places where we have, again, encampments or supportive housing units, where we have homeless shelters, where we have group homes, things of that nature, where folks may be struggling in many aspects of their life. The ability for us to reach those folks and to reach those that are providing support, to let them know what's going on and where they need to go, really needs to be part of a emergency planning. So for us, what I would say is we see it as a way of ensuring that we are wrapping our arms around all Nova Scotians, not just the ones that have the privilege of having access to online supports. So for us, what I would say is, I go back to in an emergency, you are vulnerable. There has to be a recognition that many Nova Scotians live in a vulnerable state all the time. And access to information on an emergency basis is absolutely critical. But quite frankly, access to any kinds of support that are offered online should be considered critical. And so our plan really is to work with other departments to ensure that the sectors that they support that are considered to be vulnerable or requiring additional supports are identified in our plans. It goes kind of back to digital is so fantastic from the ability of the data that it provides you. So whether it's the ability to physically see where people are through being able to track them down through their phones, but also understanding that you need to know where they are to get them the information, and then where they can go to. And I will say, we are seeing more emergencies, so more wildfires, more flooding, more things of that nature, but we're also seeing more people in vulnerable situations for longer term. So, and I would say to you that those that are experiencing vulnerability, certainly from a financial perspective, one of the first things they give up is internet access. It's one of the bills that they cut. And in some ways, they're cutting off their access to us to protect them and help them. So we would see it as a key piece of any planning for an emergency. And so we'll be working hard over the next 12 to 18 months to create some strategies around that with other departments.
I love to hear that. Thank you, Meredith. What do you think about this, Neal?
A lot of echoing kind of what Meredith's talking about here, but we're actually going through a process right now to kind of enhance our volunteer management. So just, from a digital perspective, we're actually bringing in a new, best way I could describe it is a volunteer management system that will provide, frankly, better information, more information, faster access for our Guard members around incidents when they happen. Even the sign-up process, is kind of enhanced by the tool that we will have. And again, keeping in the back of my mind of, some of the people that we do have sometimes need some assistance there. And we do kind of look for ways that we can do that. For example, we use 211 for people to sign up. They can do that. But, I think it's really kind of, again, what Meredith said of that tracking of data and information is hugely important for us as we move forward as the Guard. In particular, especially when you have volunteers coming into an emergency scene. One of the things that always happens is a sign in and sign out process. So our new system will allow us to digitally do that through an app. I mean, there is still the face-to-face, but it's so much more efficient. Our members, I think, will certainly appreciate that opportunity. And it creates another level of safety. And what I mean by that is, so imagine that you've come to a scene and it's 10 o'clock at night and you're driving home. Maybe you would have signed out at the scene that's a half-hour drive from your home, and something happens on your drive home. For me, that's not a comforting feeling to know that my volunteer hasn't made it home, but this would actually allow them to sign out when they arrive at home through their app. I mean, obviously they'd have to have access, an internet connection and things like that, or cell connection, but that just, it's an added level of safety from an experience perspective that, that inclusion and use of digital technology will allow us to have.
Yeah, keeping those guards safe is got to be a big priority, and I'm sure from just the logistics and organizing perspective, tools that can make that faster, easier, safer are what you're all about.
Yeah.
To really strengthen that group. Did you say 1,300?
So we currently have 1,300 Nova Scotians that we call deployable, meaning so we could put 1,300 people out across the province to support communities if the need was ever there. So hopefully we never have that need, but it's good to know that we have so many fellow Nova Scotians that have stepped up to help their community when they need it.
It's incredible. I think that number is going to keep growing the more people realize what it does and what it can do. I think one of the stories I heard is, you're going to create lists of people who have pets, and some of those pets aren't, hey, can you go grab my cat? It's like, I've got 3 horses in a barn. And it's like, okay, who knows how to deal with horses, right? And you're going to know that. Ask Neal; he's got a whole list, right?
That's
incredible.
Right. Well, and just to your point, just small tidbit of people signing up. It actually, I hate to say it, but when these incidents happen, it actually helps us a lot because people kind of find out more about us or see us being activated. And in the first 3 weeks of Long Lake, we had actually 300 Nova Scotians sign up for the Guard. So, I don't wish for any event to happen, but it certainly is great opportunity for people to see where the need is and sign up for the Guard.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the future Nova Scotia Guard is really bright, and I've got an idea I'm going to run by you, but we'll see if we have time in front of everyone else here. I'll put you on the spot. Dawn, you work in a municipality, and we all know that it's the level of government closest to people. It's also the one with the least resources. It's got to be a tough role, especially when you're facing these kind of crises. How does this all sit with you? What could we do better if we focused on digital inclusion? How could we support a municipality like yours?
Honestly, being a small rural municipality has its own strengths. I think building on what Meredith said, we discovered there were people that had vulnerabilities long before there was a wildfire in West Dalhousie. And with the help of people like Neal and Meredith, we're helping find them resources that they need for their sustenance for day-to-day life. There are tools that were available to them that they were not aware of. And using people in the community and word of mouth, being able to use the digital tools to get key people in the community aware of some of the supports that are available through government resources really spreads by word of mouth and helps very vulnerable people that exist in the community. This, as small a community as it was not without homelessness. There was homelessness in this community. And certainly if you want to go down the road of talking about animals, I would say that the digital world helped us be able to send people in on a daily basis, crawling under beds to find cats and crawling through rubble to find chickens. One of the most important things that happened was the resource that developed for people that were willing to help to take in, for example, livestock or companion animals, because we were able to build an inventory online and share with people in need the resources that were available. When we did an evacuation, for example, on the Highway 10 area, we had a number of people that had livestock, and we were able in many circumstances to marry up people who were willing to take livestock trailers out, pick up their livestock and take it to their home to look after those animals for the period of time that people were evacuated. That was an extremely valuable resource. And people helping people, people stepping up, people making the community strong. The digital world is a tool for helping that happen.
Oh, thank you. And I think if there's anything we can all rally around, it's helping animals. It's just, it's heartwarming and also horrifying and heartbreaking to think about what the alternatives have kind of been before now. So we're just about out of time. I'm going to glance at the audience and see, does anybody here have a question for the panel? We got time for one. Yes. Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay, our team built the design of that online service. Am I not talking loud? Okay, talk a little louder. And we tested it, I tested it, and the feedback that we got, that whole thing with pets wasn't even in there. So really getting that feedback directly from people who are out in the communities is so relevant to that, and the improvement of it over time. People didn't understand what infrastructure was. They wondered something about life insurance. Like there were things in there that made them kind of, what does this mean? And some people were wouldn't go any further because of things they were seeing that were making them feel a little bit. So just that I'm putting my usability hat on there and continuing to test that product, I think would be helpful going forward.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, this really brings this great connection between two of the government innovations over the last few years that are really making a lot of this possible. One, of course, being the Department of Emergency Management, but the Department of Cybersecurity and Digital Solutions is also relatively new, and it combines some other existing resources into one place to really bring the digital world to Nova Scotia in a way that suits us. And so to think that you're testing the app that then you're using out there to help people do things like save their homes, save their animals, and stay connected is just such a beautiful thing. I'm so proud of what's happening. Thank you for that. So, okay, we are out of time, if you can believe that. 2:49. I want to thank our guests so much, Meredith Cowan, Don Campbell, Neal Alderson. Thank you all for watching, everyone at home, everyone here in the room. And guess what? One of you is a winner. Well, you're all winners, but one of you has also won a $250 gift card to Orchard, Canada's largest refurbisher of mobile devices. So we're drawing for that name shortly, the end of the day. So stay tuned. And again, just want to thank you all for being here this afternoon. Thank you all for your work, and I'm sure we'll catch up with all of you very soon to keep talking about all this great work.